She was sitting on the curb outside the Laramie County shelter with a garbage bag between her knees and nothing else. 12 years old, maybe 13. Her coat was too thin for a Wyoming October, and she had pulled it closed at the collar with both fists the way you do when you've already accepted that the cold is winning and you're just slowing it down. She did not cry. She did not look up at the cars that passed. She sat with the particular stillness of a child who has learned that drawing attention to yourself is a different kind of danger. And she waited, the way children wait when they have nowhere. They are certain they are allowed to go. The German shepherd saw her first. He stopped mid-stride on the sidewalk, planted all four paws, and turned his head toward the curb with an absolute, ears-forward focus that Sergeant First Class Cole Hayes had learned over 6 years and 2 continents was never wrong. Cole stopped walking. He looked where the dog was looking. The girl looked up then, just once, and said 3 words in a voice so quiet he almost missed them over the wind. "I have nowhere." That was all. Cole Hayes stood on that sidewalk in Cheyenne, Wyoming, in the last gray light of an October evening, and understood that tonight was not going to go the way he had planned. It was going to go the way it needed to go. Maverick had already decided. Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from tonight. If this story stays with you, please subscribe and follow it all the way to the end. What Maverick led Cole to find, and what that little girl had been carrying alone, is something no one in Cheyenne that night was prepared for. Cole Hayes was 43 years old and looked like someone who had spent those years doing things rather than thinking about them, which was accurate. He was 6 feet even, 190 pounds, with dark blonde hair going gray at the temples and a face that had been weathered by altitude and wind and the particular brand of unrelenting sun that exists in Afghanistan in July at 8,000 feet. His jaw was wide and set, and his nose had been broken once, cleanly, in Kunar Province in 2014, and had healed straight, which people who knew him said was somehow more unsettling than if it had healed crooked, as if even the bones in his face had been trained to stay in formation. His eyes were a pale, clear hazel that shifted toward green in flat light and toward gray in low light. And they moved the way the eyes of trained men move. Not quickly, not nervously, but in a continuous, unhurried sweep that took in exits and hands and faces and distances without appearing to do any of those things. He was not a large presence in the way some men are large. He did not fill a room with volume or force. He filled it with the quality of attention he brought to it. People in his vicinity had a tendency to lower their voices and mean what they said. He had served 14 years in the United States Army as a Sergeant First Class in the 75th Ranger Regiment. 4 deployments: Kandahar in 2009, the Kunar Valley in 2012, Mosul in 2014, and a Joint Special Operations Task Force rotation in northern Syria in 2017 that he had signed paperwork about and did not discuss. He had come home from Syria with a Bronze Star with a Combat V device, a partially torn ACL that had been surgically repaired in Bagram and had never fully recovered, and a ringing in his left ear from a pressure wave in a building collapse that the Army doctors had told him would probably resolve within 6 months. That had been 8 years ago. He had retired from service at the end of 2018 with 20% disability and a handshake, and the particular kind of silence that comes from spending 14 years in conditions that make silence feel like something you've earned. He had been living in Cheyenne for 2 years, working part-time as a firearms safety instructor at a range outside town and part-time doing contract security assessments for a small firm that did not advertise. He was not unhappy. He was figuring out what unhappiness even meant when you no longer had a mission to orient around, which was a different problem and took longer. He had Maverick, and that helped more than he had expected it to. Maverick was a 6-year-old German Shepherd, with a coat the color of a winter morning, deep black along the saddle and ears, warming into a dense, almost rust-toned tan along the chest and legs and face. With a white blaze along his muzzle that had faded slightly with age into a soft cream. He weighed 84 pounds and moved with the unhurried, self-possessed authority of an animal who has never once been uncertain about what he was doing or why. His left rear leg bore a faint but permanent hitch in the stride, a souvenir from a compound search in Mosul in 2014, where a secondary device had gone off behind the team and a fragment had buried itself in the muscle above his left stifle joint. The fragment had been removed. The hitch had stayed. It did not slow him. Cole had stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing a scar on someone you love. His right ear was fully intact. His left ear had a thin, half-inch notch along its outer edge from the same incident, healed clean, that gave his silhouette a slightly asymmetrical quality Cole had always privately considered distinguished. He did not react to loud noises or raised voices or the presence of strangers. He reacted to the specific frequency of wrongness, to the tension in a space that precedes something, to the stillness in a person that means they are surviving rather than living. And in 6 years, Cole had never once seen him react to that frequency and been wrong about what it meant. Cole had fought the military working dog adoption paperwork for 9 months. He had written letters and made phone calls and filed appeals and involved his congressman's office and done everything the system required, and some things the system had not required, but that he had done anyway. Because the alternative, Maverick going to someone who had not been through what they had been through together, was not something he was willing to accept as an outcome. The adoption had finally cleared on a Thursday in March, and Cole had driven 4 hours to pick him up, and Maverick had climbed into the passenger seat and laid his chin on Cole's right forearm, and they had driven home without any other ceremony being necessary. The October evening had been cold and clear. Cole had been walking Maverick along the residential streets east of downtown Cheyenne, a route they ran most evenings, when Maverick had stopped on the sidewalk 2 blocks east of the Laramie County Family Services building and locked onto the girl on the curb with the garbage bag. Her name was Brianna. She was 12 years old. She told Cole this in the particular careful way that children tell strangers the minimum true things: her first name, her age, the fact that she was waiting for someone who, Cole understood from the gap in what she did not say, was not coming. She had a round face and dark eyes, and the kind of contained, watchful expression that belongs to children who have spent time in situations that required them to read rooms. She had been in the family shelter for 11 days. She was not allowed back in tonight, because tonight was a Wednesday. And on Wednesdays, the shelter ran a different intake protocol that did not have space for returning placements after 6 p.m., a policy that existed for reasons that had made administrative sense at the time and had been reviewed twice in the last 3 years and had not been changed. It was now 6:47 p.m. Maverick walked to the curb and sat down next to Brianna without being told to. He pressed the full weight of his right side against her leg and stayed there. Brianna looked at him for a long moment, and then she put her hand in the thick fur at the back of his neck, slowly, the way you do something when you're not sure you're allowed to, and Maverick leaned harder into her knee. Cole called the shelter's main line from his phone. He held for 4 minutes. He was told, politely, that the protocol was the protocol and that there was a youth crisis line that could provide guidance. He wrote the crisis line number down without comment. He called the crisis line. It rang 11 times without answer. He put the phone in his pocket and looked at the girl on the curb and at the dog sitting against her knee like a warm wall against the October wind. He did not know yet what Maverick was going to find. He did not know yet what was in the garbage bag, or what Brianna was not saying about the person she was waiting for. or what the county's records would show when a specific woman named Linda Marsh at the Laramie County Child Welfare Office opened them the following morning and spent 15 minutes very quietly at her desk before making 2 phone calls that would change the shape of the next several months. He would understand all of that later. Right now, there was a 12-year-old girl on a cold curb and a dog who had decided the matter was settled. "Come on," Cole said. "We'll figure this out." He didn't know yet what he was leading them toward. As it turned out, Maverick did. There was a coffee shop 2 blocks north called Doyle's that Cole had been going to for 18 months because it was open until 9, and the owner, a 68-year-old retired Army warrant officer named Gene Doyle, did not ask questions and made good coffee and kept the heat running. Cole had been in twice when Gene had quietly fed someone who couldn't pay. He had never commented on this, and Gene had never acknowledged it, and that was the basis of a respect that both of them considered sufficient. Cole pushed the door open, and Gene looked up from behind the counter and took in Cole and the dog and the girl with the garbage bag and said, without pausing, "Sit wherever you want." "Coco's on." Brianna sat in the booth nearest the window with Maverick on the floor at her feet. She wrapped both hands around the mug Gene put in front of her and looked out the window at the street. Cole sat across from her and said, "You want to tell me who you were waiting for?" She told him. It took a while and came in pieces, and Cole listened the way he had learned to listen in circumstances where what a person said and what they meant were related but not identical. Her mother's name was Darcy. Darcy had been in the shelter with her for the first 6 of the 11 days. On the 7th day, Darcy had left to meet someone and had not come back. Brianna had told the shelter staff that her mother was coming back, because she believed it, and then because she was afraid of what happened to children when they stopped believing it out loud in front of adults who wrote things in forms. She had been given 3 days of continued placement on the basis of that belief. And then 2 more. And then tonight, when the Wednesday protocol had closed the door, she had taken her garbage bag and sat on the curb to wait, because there was nowhere else she was certain she was allowed to be. Cole asked one question. "Does your mother know a man named Preston Cale?" Brianna looked at him. She had not told him that name. Maverick had found a flyer on the sidewalk near the curb when Cole had been on hold with the shelter. It was a missing persons flyer, handmade, printed on copy paper. The kind that gets put up and taken down and mostly ignored. The photograph was of a woman in her 30s with dark hair and the same round face as the girl on the curb. The name at the bottom was Darcy Voss. The contact number was the Laramie County Sheriff's non-emergency line. The date at the top was 11 days ago. Maverick had picked it up off the sidewalk and carried it to Cole's knee and held it there, ears up, until Cole had taken it. Cole had read the name and looked at Brianna and understood in a single organizing moment what the shelter's protocol had not been designed to account for. This child was not waiting for a mother who had chosen not to return. She was waiting for a mother who had disappeared. Preston Cale was 39 years old and operated a private debt consolidation firm out of a leased office on Central Avenue in Cheyenne under the name Cale Financial Solutions. He had been operating under that name for 4 years. Before that, under a slightly different name in Casper, for 3 years. Before that, in a variation in Colorado Springs, for 2. The business model was consistent across all 3 iterations. He targeted women in financial distress, recently divorced, recently unemployed, recently out of shelters, and offered debt management services that required, as a condition of service, a power of attorney arrangement that he had a lawyer draw up in language that most clients did not fully understand. That allowed him to access and restructure accounts on their behalf. He restructured them, without exception, in one direction. Preston Cale had a community reputation as a generous man. He contributed to the Downtown Improvement Association. He sponsored a youth baseball team. He had 2 prior civil complaints filed against him with the Wyoming State Bar, both of which had been dismissed for insufficient documentation, in part because the clients who filed them had subsequently recanted under circumstances that the bar's investigator had noted as unusual, but had not pursued. He attended St. Matthew's Episcopal on Christmas and Easter. His car was a current year silver Range Rover. His office receptionist, who had worked for him for 8 months and was in the process of quietly gathering documents, had given her notice the previous week. Cole Hayes called Jean Doyle over to the table and said 6 words. "Can she stay here tonight?" Jean looked at the girl and the dog and said, "My wife's upstairs. She'll want to feed her something." That was the end of that question. Cole walked outside into the October cold and called his contact at the Laramie County Sheriff's Office, a detective named Karen Whitfield, who had been working economic crime cases for 11 years and who had, in Cole's assessment, the best instincts of anyone he had met in law enforcement, which was a population he had spent 14 years working alongside in various configurations. He gave her Darcy Voss's name. He gave her Preston Cale's name. He gave her the location of the flyer and told her about the power of attorney structure Brianna had described, incompletely and without understanding what she was describing, as her mother having signed some papers for a money man. Whitfield listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "How long have you had this?" 2 hours, Cole said. "I've had Cale's name for 6 months, Whitfield said. I've been building. This might be the piece I needed." She paused. "The woman, Darcy Voss. I'm going to run it now." Maverick sat on the sidewalk outside Doyle's with his ears turning slowly, reading the cold air. He had done what he came to do on that sidewalk 2 blocks away. He had found the flyer and carried it and held it until the right person had it. He had sat beside the girl until the cold was less cold. He was not done, exactly. He was waiting to see what came next, which was, Cole had long understood, the only gear he truly operated in. Darcy Voss was found the following morning at 7:22 a.m. at an extended stay motel on the western edge of Cheyenne, in a room registered under a false name that Preston Cale had used twice before, in Casper. She was alive. She was disoriented and frightened, and had been held there under a combination of coercion and a fear of what would happen to Brianna that Cale had carefully cultivated and maintained. She had not abandoned her daughter. She had been taken from her. The distinction, for Brianna, when Detective Whitfield drove her to the motel and she saw her mother standing in the parking lot in the gray morning light, was everything. Preston Cale was arrested at his Central Avenue office at 9:15 that same morning while a client sat in the waiting room. The receptionist who had been gathering documents had, as it turned out, been gathering them for Detective Whitfield directly for the previous 3 weeks. The charges were unlawful restraint, coercion, and 14 counts of financial fraud across 3 jurisdictions. The Range Rover was seized as a material asset. The office on Central Avenue closed that afternoon. The youth baseball sponsorship was quietly transferred to a local credit union. The 2 prior complainants who had recanted both called the Laramie County Sheriff's Office within 48 hours of the arrest. Neither of them, under the circumstances, was difficult to reach. 9 months after the October evening, outside the family shelter, Cole Hayes sat on the small porch of his house east of downtown Cheyenne in the last of a July evening with a cup of coffee going cold in his hand. His knee ached in the summer heat the way it ached in every temperature, reliably and without drama, the way old wounds become part of the weather. He was not at rest in the way some men are at rest. He was never entirely at rest, and had stopped expecting to be. But he was settled in a way that felt different from the unsettled adjusting of the 2 years before. And the difference was enough. Maverick lay stretched fully on his side on the porch boards in a rare moment of genuine repose, one hind leg extended in the warm air, his ears at half-mast, his eyes half-closed. The very picture of a dog who has concluded that today's work is done and that the evening will take care of itself. The hitch in his left rear leg was visible even when he lay still, a slight asymmetry in how the leg rested, and Cole looked at it sometimes, the way you look at things that remind you of something important that happened, without sadness, without anything except a clear-eyed accounting of what was real. Darcy Voss had a job. It was a good one, administrative coordinator at a Cheyenne law firm whose senior partner had read about the case and reached out to the County Victim Services Office the week after the arrest. She had her own apartment. Brianna had started 7th grade at a school 2 blocks from the apartment and had joined the cross-country team, which her coach said she was good at, and which Cole had privately suspected she would be good at the moment he first saw how she sat on that curb, with the patient internal economy of someone who knew how to endure the distance. Preston Cale had entered a guilty plea in March to the consolidated charges and had been sentenced to 11 years in the Wyoming State Penitentiary. The sentence included full restitution to 17 identified victims across 3 states. His attorney had argued for leniency on the basis that Cale had no violent priors. The judge had not found this compelling. None of the people in the courtroom who had driven there to witness the sentencing had found it compelling either. The courtroom had been full. Cole heard the porch door behind him, and then Maverick's tail began its slow, full sweep wag. Not the alert wag, not the working wag, but the deep, easy back and forth of a dog greeting someone the world has confirmed is safe. Brianna came out and sat in the other porch chair with a glass of lemonade and pulled her knees up and looked at the street. She and her mother came to dinner on the 2nd Sunday of every month. It had started as a gesture and had become, without anyone deciding it had, a standing arrangement. Maverick rolled onto his stomach and put his chin on his front paws and looked at her with his pale amber eyes from 2 feet away. She reached over and scratched him behind the notched ear. He closed his eyes. "He always does that," she said. "He always will," Cole said. They sat on the porch together in the July evening, and the street was quiet, and the light was warm, and there was nothing that needed to be said that hadn't already been said by everything that had led to this. Sometimes miracles don't arrive as thunder from the sky. Sometimes they arrive as a dog stopping on a cold sidewalk and refusing to move until someone pays attention to what he sees. God does not always place answers in the hands of people who are looking. Sometimes he places them in front of people who are simply walking past and trusting the animal at their side to know what matters. Brianna had said 3 words into the October dark, and a German shepherd had heard them at a frequency that bypassed every policy and protocol and closed door. That is what loyalty sounds like when it has no language, when it is pure presence, pure attention, pure refusal to leave until the thing that needs doing is done. We pass children on curbs. We pass flyers on sidewalks. We pass the things Maverick stopped for every single day. And we keep walking because we have somewhere to be. Maybe tonight's reminder is this. Sometimes where you need to be is exactly where a dog who has earned every scar on his body has already stopped and waited for you to look up. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to know that children are still being seen, that dogs still lead us to the right places, and that people who prey on the vulnerable do eventually run out of room to run. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from tonight. And if you've ever had a moment where an animal showed you something a person had missed, we want to hear it. Your story is worth telling. If you believe in courage, in loyalty, and in the grace of second chances, please subscribe so you never miss the next story. May God bless you, protect your family, and open your eyes tonight to whatever or whoever is waiting on the curb right outside your line of sight.